I'm Tom Bradshaw, and I'm running for District 15 in the state senate. And I'd like to be your state senator so I can come back and talk about and have a civil conversation with the people in the legislature as one of those members on a one-on-one basis about the successes that education investment we made in this community has helped North Carolina, because I believe it can help their counties. I know that all the counties in North Carolina are not Wake County. And even though I'm principally responsible for District 15, I'd like to share the good things that have happened here that we can make happen all over North Carolina. I think we really have to stop. I'm worried about, I don't think people really understand what they've done. As I've been out campaigning, I don't think people understand how bad it is. And while they think the tax or breaks are there, in all my economic development work as a public citizen and in my role as the mayor, role as Secretary of Transportation, nobody ever asked me about the taxes. They always said, tell me what you're doing about education, training the families of our that we bring here, and the workforce. Everything was all about education. Go back to 1960 when Terry Sanford changed us from being tobacco, textiles, and furniture. If we're going to reach the higher brackets, we had to get better about education and that commitment. And Jim Hunt continued that, and even Jim Holzhauser and Jim Martin continued education. Today we got to go back to what got us this unbelievable growth. Longer answer, but I tell you, I grew up, Durham was bigger than Raleigh. When we merged our city and county school systems, that's what put us on the road to growth. Look at us now, because we put the first things first. Education has to be our thing. I think we have to be honest about this. Incentive games, in my opinion, started because North Carolina used to be always the most attractive thing for everything. We had the lowest building costs, lowest taxes, best labor rates, everything that happened to us. We think about the growth that I experienced in the 60s through the year 2000. Incentives became popular because that's the only way people could compete with us. And sometimes we could put up the money. Think about the car companies we didn't get because we couldn't do $300–400 million. I think the film incentives was one of the wonderful things that started when I was Secretary of Transportation during Jim Hunt's time. Seeing that positive income and jobs that were created in the film industry in and around Wilmington, and even on the highways that I was Secretary of, granting permission to make commercials. That was good money, good jobs for North Carolina. I would go back to where we put it originally. Maybe it needs to be sort of tinkered with, but the idea of that incentive, it has worked, and it really created real jobs. I don't think so now, not where the location is. First of all, fracking, we all want to be energy independent, no problem about that. But the way we went about fracking, typically having served on the Environmental Management Commission and actually chairman of it for a number of years, you do the public hearings, you talk about what you're doing. You have the public understand what the benefits are, what is the downside. We never talked about what if, when the idea is that water supply that's so critical to eastern North Carolina could be affected by that. Even Joe Maverick, who says it'd be the worst thing we could do in North Carolina. I think we have to be cautious about in the environment. It just doesn't happen that way. We need to know what we're doing and get the people understand what it's about. Energy independence is important, but I think right now the environment says we probably should not do fracking at the locations they've talked about. I think today, after what we've experienced in the last several years, I probably have changed my mind. For a long time, I thought that death penalty was a deterrent. I'm not sure that it is today. I think there are certain crimes that we ought to punish with, certainly life imprisonment with no parole. But today, I probably would vote to abolish the death penalty. Well, I think the General Assembly today shows me more that we're not talking to one another. You would have think with all of them in the same party, they'd be working together. And they wouldn't have taken from May 4th through August to sort of get together when typically the short session is to adjust the numbers. We thought everybody's going to come and give a pay raise to teachers and probably go home and campaign. It bothers me greatly that we're perhaps not having the civil discussions. I think the bipartisan effort, in some ways, let's go back and talk about how we do legislation. Let's talk about the pros and cons. I don't see a sense of encouraging that kind of discussions. Maybe that's why I'm running now as opposed to somebody saying wait a while till it's better when the governor's running. I don't think we can afford to wait. I think right now we need to ask them to have a better civil conversation. Let us know what we're doing, not be afraid of the decision you're making. And I think honestly they are really, right now I'm not sure all the members understand that. And I've campaigned, perhaps many of you know, for a Smart Start. When I met with the individual members about Smart Start, they wanted to keep that. Leadership didn't want to keep Smart Start. but we're able to save it with a 20% cut. My sense is, I think you always want to talk about the benefits, the pros and cons, and I don't think there's that kind of conversation going on in the legislature today. Well, I think, first of all, I'd like to go back and put in all my literature, education first. That's what got us to where we are. That's what brought the growth and development, I believe, for our community. We got schools right in 1976, a long time ago when we merged it. A little controversial, but a strong legislative body gave that to us. We couldn't get the people to vote for it, but the legislature gave it to us. That investment has gotten us way down the line because we put education first. I'd like for us to go back and have that discussion. Let me have a chance to have a civil conversation with these folks in the legislature and say, how are you going to grow and develop your areas? Education is the key. I'm on the Public School Forum. We've got a number of things we've done we'd like to share with people. That roadmap to doing better in North Carolina starts with more attention to education, doing better than we are. Graduation rates have to come up. We need to help everybody have an opportunity. Education has to be number one. You know, North Carolina has a history of always going to the people about transportation. First of all, we have a AAA bond rating. We ought to think about maybe taking that to the bank. I think the public has also shown every time we put a bond issue on the ballot, it is passed. I think you have a lot of work to do and explain how it works, who benefits, what are the projects, and the ability to deliver those projects. But we haven't been to the market and asked the people to help us have that. The uncertainty of the federal program, we were going to have $1 billion shortfall. We need to look at the infrastructure. That's the creation of jobs that have gone away. So I think we really ought to think about using our credit if we in fact do something about transportation. Use what we have now, do bonds, and get those kind of things done with existing what we have. I used to think as I worked around the country that the part-time legislature would perhaps if we even set fixed dates and come together and say we're going to only pay per diem to come and get the job done. I don't know that we want that. We need to try to attract people who don't become professional legislators. We see what Congress is not doing, and they're professional legislators, and probably more dysfunctional than they've ever been. I used to be so proud of what we did in North Carolina, coming to town, doing our work, understand the process with input from citizens along the way, going back home and talking to people. I would not be for a full-time legislature. Well, first of all, I'm running because it scares me. All the work I've done in education, I see them systematically taking it apart. I just know from all the activity I've had as an economic developer, a public servant, investment working with other states around the country. Most everybody copied what we were trying to do in education. We were the poorest state in the South. We changed that when Terry Sanford said, let's do something about education. And we started reaching beyond textiles and tobacco and furniture making. My sense is, I don't want to tell you, that's what we've done. What we've done in education has made it wonderful. Look at who's come here. People who've come here for the education, for the bright people. Look at the industry we have today, whether it's Red Hat, IBM, and the others. They came here for our education people, the people we were turning out and the jobs we created. We have raised that standard. We are really one of the most attractive. That's why everybody in the country is saying, what's going on in North Carolina? You were our model, even to the point of NC State University being the campus that put private companies on the university campus. We're the talk of the nation about that model. My sense is I want everybody to stop and look at the success we've had, and education is the root of that. And that's what I want to tell everybody and to share that with them firsthand. Remember that I use the paperboy. I wake up automatically at 4:30 where I have a clock on. So I do an awful lot of watching the TV programs of business that I didn't get, whether it's MSNBC or whatever, watching that. And I probably do some extra walking, and then I try to visit with people and really talk about the things I was able to do only from the standpoint of trying to inspire people. Lots of folks ask me to talk to their kids about what jobs. I really look forward to those kind of Saturdays because I've been one fortunate guy to sort of be able to do what I've done in my life, you know, having grown up here. Actually worked at the newspaper was my first, most of my life. But being able to see what education did to me and working in that environment and my public service made me have me an introduction. So I'm trying to put back. I still work on the YMCA. I was raised at the YMCA, but I'm on that board raising money. And we got a great YMCA. We're a $78 million business. That's what our YMCA does for young people in this community, like they did for me. Well, the people that I've tried to model after are people like Zach Bacon in the real estate business, Cliff Cameron, who was from not here, the Cameron Village, mortgage, and Ed Richards. I was privileged to work with people who inspired me and were mentors. I could name another dozen mentors who helped me, because I'd ask you to be a mentor. If I thought you knew something I wanted to know, I'd ask you if you help me. And this community is full of those. But probably Cliff Cameron. He was one of those representatives that's sort of stately in his actions, very big in thinking about it. He's the fellow who brought all the money at a time when North Carolina was capital poor. And I was the guy who went behind him as the gopher of delivering North Carolina information that we wanted him to understand and invest in North Carolina. So Cliff Cameron probably would be my mentor. Well, I've always been a Democrat. I joined pretty early in the Democratic. Like you're celebrating P.R. Lotta. I used to be the guy that put those stakes in the ground after he made them. And I worked for Al Adams. And I learned to be in the Democratic Party of understanding that's what we're all about. Back in the days when everybody belonged to the Democratic Party because it's the only party. But I've stayed there because I think I'm one of those fellows who would be sort of moderate as relates to business kind of things, but I'm really liberal as relates to people issues and taking care of people, because I know what it's like when people took care of me and invested. And I think we got to make life better for everybody. So I'm a Democrat and proud to be a Democrat.